so many winter squash last through the winter and so many don't. And how do you know the difference? I'd love to share with you a little bit more about winter squash this morning. And friends, welcome to live Q&A. It's Petra here at Fruition Seeds, sending love from our gardens to yours here in the Finger Lakes. And yes, it's true. This is live Q&A, so jump on in. Don't be shy. Anything goes. And I'd love to begin and end all of our live Q&As with a song, story, poem, with something to ground us in our time together. And this morning, some words. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I love when he says, if you can't fly, you can run. If you can't run, you can walk. If you can't walk, you can crawl. Anyway, just keep going. I love that. One more time. If you can't fly, you can run. If you can't run, you can walk. If you can't walk, you can crawl, and just keep going. And I love that reminder that in these times when it can be so hard to know what we can do in the face of such a broken world with our own broken hearts, how can we possibly make a difference? And somehow remembering that we just have to take that next step, and then that next step, that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the next step. And it's a beautiful metaphor as well, because even if you don't have physical feet to move, you need the neurons in your brain to have that hope and the audacity for hope before your feet can even move, literally or metaphorically. So we love you, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Your legacy is not forgotten. You are never more relevant than now. And thank you for being an inspiration in our lives. And thank you all for joining, and welcome to live Q&A. So jump on in and don't be shy. And I'd love to begin with sharing a little bit more about these beautiful squash in my hand, because one of them, it's not surprising that it's in my hand. The other, it is surprising it's in my hand. And here's the deeper story of why. Not all squash have all the same characteristics. Some, the flesh is a different color, the flesh is a different texture, different flavor. There's a lot of differences that we can see with our eyes and mouths very clearly. But one of those differences is how long do winter squash store? Not all winter squash store equally long. And some of them, in fact, you don't even need to cure, like this delicata is delicious straight off the vine at the end of August often. And we often eat everything, not just the flesh inside, but including that skin. It's really thin and incredibly delightful. And that thin skin simultaneously means that it's not great for storage. And so honestly, we generally eat the final delicatas in our lives around New Year's. So here we are, middle of January. Somehow, how did we get here? Middle of January, we're still enjoying our delicata squash. Amazing. But it won't be long. So we're going to eat her for dinner and not take our chances. Now, by contrast, the Sibley squash, which is a Hubbard style Maxima, much thicker skin, and it lasts so much longer. Honestly, the first time that I met Sibley was on the kitchen table of our dear friend Patrice Fortier. He has a beautiful organic farm where he grows seeds up in Quebec on the St. Lawrence, closer to the Atlantic than we are, like way up there. Much shorter season. So yes, he was growing Sibley. And so we went to visit him. It was the end of June. And this squash that I have here in my hands is, I'm not exactly sure. I could do the math. I think it's the great-great-grandchild of that squash that he had on his table. and so it was the end of June, and he had harvested it the year prior. So well grown, well harvested, and well stored. well cured and well stored, Sibley will last months and months and months and months. So yes, I can't wait to share more. There's so much more to share, but that's a little story of why some winter squash lasts longer than others. And Christina says, hi, I have both the fish and kelp fertilizer, woohoo, and the granular fertilizer, yes. Can I use any of these on my houseplants? Totally. So when we pot up our houseplants, I put a little bit of that granular in, and then I totally feed with our fish emulsion as well, albeit I only feed with fish emulsion in the summer when our house plants are actually outside of the house. So I generally put that like as soon as they go out in late May, sometimes the beginning of June. That's when here on our farm in Zone 5, that's when we can be really confident that we'll put them outside and they won't be experiencing anything close to a frost. So at that point, I give them all a dose of our fish emulsion, and our fish emulsion is amazing. It's very concentrated, so a tablespoon, an ounce goes into a gallon of water. So little goes a long way, which is amazing. And so we feed all of them, and then again when we bring them out in the spring, and then again in early August. And that's the only time. You can feed them inside your house, but here's the thing. It's going to smell for a few hours. I smell like fish emulsion for a few hours, which isn't the end of the world. But more the bigger thing is, if you're feeding them in the winter when they're inside, and some plants genuinely don't need much light, but generally, giving plants more food, but not also giving them more light can actually be stressful for them, especially when it's really rich, dreamy, delicious food like that fish emulsion. So that's why we only feed them fish emulsion in the summer when they're outside. And I'm so glad that you asked. And yeah, this is live Q&A, so don't be shy and jump on in, friends. I can't wait to hear what questions you might have for me. And I'd also like to share, lots of people have been asking seed starting questions, and I just want to remind us all that it's much better to start seeds actually on the later, what feels like the later side, rather than the early side. Even in short seasons, like we have here in Zone 5, it's actually counterintuitive, but you are totally shooting yourself in the foot to start seeds too early, because here's the thing. A young, less stressed transplant will be more abundant, more healthy, happy, more abundant than an older, stressed transplant. So as hard as it is, especially on social media, to hold our horses, I'm quite confident that you and your plants will be so much happier when you resist the urge to start seeds too soon. We don't start anything. We start our ginger, which will be available in March, along with our dahlia tubers and potato tubers. Woohoo! Stay tuned for that exciting day in March. But we start our ginger first in mid-March, our onions and leeks in late March, and then our tomatoes, peppers, eggplants in early April. And oh man, if you haven't already seen, we have these sweet little planting calendars. Dun da da! And this planting calendar comes in every order, and you can also find just a free PDF of it on our website as well. So you don't even have to purchase from us to enjoy it. And while you're at it, go ahead and download this as well. We have our Rise and Shine Starting Seeds with Ease. This is my 40-page seed starting book, and it's pretty sweet. It has direct sow info, transplant info, dialing in soil blocks, all kinds of stuff. 40 awesome pages, and we do sell paper copies, which are awesome, but we have a free download of it too, so that we all have access to this information. So go ahead, jump on our website, fruitionseeds.com, and enjoy it. And Allison says, I saved a piece of my summer ginger and just planted and placed it on a heat mat. Am I too early? You are definitely not too early. It just wants to keep growing and keep eating, keep feeding it like crazy. Yeah, I'm so excited for you. And let me know how it goes. Generally, ginger season to season without here in Zone 5 can be a stretch, it just doesn't have the vigor to regrow really healthfully and abundantly. So I recommend even getting another piece of ginger and seeing like side by side, like a mother rhizome that's seed stock, and see what happens side by side. And let me know. I can't wait to hear everything that you are learning and experiencing as well. And Imo says, hi, we read the Baker Creek seeds controversy. If not convenient to explain the story directly, could you give advice indirectly? Where should we buy our seeds in support of the right politics? Thank you for asking. This is a really, really important subject. And I was actually I'd like to share this with you. This week, I received a personal phone call from the founder and president of a very large seed company, which I will keep anonymous. And we shared a nice 10-minute chat. And then he said, and here's why I'm calling. We'd never met. We'd never talked before in our lives. And he said, I've been following you for years, and I really respect what you're doing. And I would like to give you some advice. And I said, I love to listen and I love to learn. Thank you for investing in me. And he said, here's the thing. We have learned, and the hard way, that it's much better to talk about what you do or don't do rather than saying what other people do or don't do. And I said, I totally agree. 110%. Thank you for this important reminder. And I asked him, I said, I wonder if there's any specific occurrence that's inspiring you to tell me this right now. And he said, well, one of my employees saw that you were on social media confirming that, or saying that Baker Creek is racist. And I said, well, they are. So, and we all are, right? Unless you're doing actively anti-racist work, you're supporting racist paradigms, and that's just the way that it goes. And so I really appreciated this person wanting to tell me and remind me, and absolutely, friends, like, talk about what you do and what you don't do. Don't go about slandering other people. And also, when it's been 400 years of systemic racial oppression, and it continues to escalate, and we continue to not talk about it. And then when someone asks me to talk about it, it is white supremacy and white solidarity that would make me say, well, that's not my business, it's their business, and I have nothing to say about this. So, which is all to say that we had a lovely conversation, this president of this very large seed company and I, about white solidarity. And yes, so Baker Creek, there's lots of different things, and I'll keep it brief. One is just cultural appropriation, which we all do. And I want to say this with love as well as critique of myself, as well as the seed industry, and of which Baker Creek is just kind of an apex, an epitome of sorts, and there are lots of seed companies actively trying to do anti-racist work and do better once they know better. Baker Creek is not one of these companies. So this is true of all seed companies, cultural appropriation. So right, this squash in my hand, this Sibley squash, this was selected for thousands of years by indigenous people. I stand here talking to you on Haudenosaunee Seneca land, occupied. I own it. I'm part of I'm complicit and benefiting daily from a very extractive, oppressive system. And that system was the same one that allowed the Sibley Seed Company in Rochester in 1888 to announce to the world that they had developed a new variety. And they called it Sibley after themselves. Does this pattern sound familiar? And so, this cultural appropriation, so there's that level of a cultural appropriation, like the Sibley. And then there's cultural appropriation like Baker Creek actively hiring ethnobotanists to go, and it's called biopiracy, when you go and buy a pepper in Thailand at a farmer's market, bring the seeds back, grow the seeds, announce that you found a very rare exotic seed, and here you can buy it now. This is a really big issue. But also Clive and Bundy, perhaps you remember in Oregon, this It's incredible. Very similar to what happened last week in our nation's capital. Like full on like armed standoffs on federal grounds and white people are not being held accountable. So Cliven Bundy, you can look it up in Oregon. I forget the year, but it was a few years ago. And he happened to also be very fond of this rare watermelon that he's been stewarding for a number of years. So Baker Creek invited Cliven Bundy. Like, imagine inviting, if Donald Trump had a watermelon that he's been selecting and breeding and improving his whole life. Imagine after everything, if any seed company or anyone invited Donald Trump to come talk about this watermelon and just talk about watermelon. This isn't political. We're not talking about anything else. We're just talking about watermelons today. No, that's not how it goes. So Baker Creek walked that line and continued to until it hit their pocket. And now they just send out checks to lots of BIPOC communities. I know many of them, and they just say, hey, here's this, and it's no strings attached, except now we're going to say that we're donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to BIPOC folks, and you can't say that we're racist. Anyway, I digress. None of us, if you're white, if you're selling seeds, you are participating in a really toxic system, and that's just the way it goes. Fruition Seeds is at the top of the list. And I have to say too, like Baker Creek invited me to come speak at their Heirloom Expo 2 summers ago, and they paid my way, flew me out, paid me a lot of money to speak in front of their crowds. And I am ashamed to say that I said yes. I thought that would be amazing and a great way to connect with people, and it was an amazing 3 days of my life that I'll always be grateful for. And like, I just want to share that to say, like, it's whenever you like point your finger, it always comes back to you, and just hold yourself lovingly accountable for the ways that we can all individually claim the ways that we are learning and growing, and that we can know better and we can do better. And also, when you see other individuals and institutions, organizations, governments not being accountable, once they know better or should, it's time, then it's time to have a larger conversation. So, I mean, we can talk about seeds too, but thank you for asking about Baker Creek, and thank you for listening to a very interesting piece of my experience of late. So in Zone 5, Horseheads, sending love to the Southern Tier. We are going to try loofahs. Have you tried them? Yes. So if you have any way of warming them up throughout the season, you will get so many more loofahs. So whether that is in a greenhouse, a high tunnel, just make sure they're like getting full sun on the south facing side of like a building that can also just be kind of a heat sink. So get the shortest day to maturity loofah you can find. And yeah, because you're not going to get loofahs if they don't go all the way to a like mature squash, which is what loofahs are. So yes, you can totally be successful, but make sure there's lots of different loofahs. And if you can find one with the shortest days to maturity, you should be good to go. It's a stretch, and like pray for a late frost in the fall, and direct sow them. Don't be tempted to transplant them, and you'll be good to go. So glad you asked. And truth, tell it, Petra, and thank you for speaking out. Thank you, friends. I so appreciate it. And Michael, just over the hill. When should I start my tomato plants? We're starting ours in the first week of April. And now you know, we're actually going to be hosting a bunch of just virtual parties for when we sow seeds and what we're doing and how and when and why and all these things. So stay tuned. If you haven't already jumped on our email list, do it. You can do it on our website, fruitionseeds.com. You can also just message us. And yeah, we'll be psyched to throw you on the list. Every week I send out an email that honestly I'm really proud of. And they're beautiful, they're informative, they're really hopeful. And they have lots of great opportunities to connect. So stay tuned for some of those planting parties in the very near future. And thank you so much for asking. Love the hope that we can do better. Oh man, we have no choice. And honestly, it's these seeds that keep me like on my knees, so grateful, remembering what hope actually might look like and feel like, how we can make it actionable in the world, because they have to break open, right? That seed is that tiny little seed, has to break open, has to release everything that it's ever known about being itself, to begin to engage vigorously with the environment around it and transform itself. So seeds transform themselves and transform the world in the process. And so, pardon the tears in my eyes, seeds every time when I don't know how else to find hope in the world. Seeds are there for me as profound teachers. And Ruth says, thank you. I've always wondered about the politics of seeds, important to me. Whew, we've only just begun, Ruth. There's so much more. And it's very complex and it's really fascinating. And I'm so honored to share anything and everything with you. And honestly, my understanding of seeds changes almost daily, and certainly on a 6-month basis. I'm like in a totally different headspace about what seeds mean, what my relationships with seeds is, and what the pros and cons of that relationship are. So it's like any friendship. I mean, seeds are just another way to relate to ourselves, to each other, to the world, to the seeds. Seeds are teachers. So, there's a reason we go from kindergarten to 12th grade and then we spend the rest of our lives unlearning. And seeds are teachers, there for us at every stage in our journey. And thank you for joining me on the journey. And Seth says, virtual planting parties? Yay! That's right! Oh my gosh, I should publish a calendar so you can just put it on the calendar and look forward to it. So yes, stay tuned. Don't be shy. And I love, Seth says, seeds of intention are hope embodied. Yes, totally. And I think too, especially when these times, I loved my friend called me up earlier this week and she said, how are you feeling? Are you feeling? And I loved that. I was like, how are you feeling? Wait, are you feeling? It's so easy to be inundated by the everything right now. And so I really love remembering that, hope can feel like this thin veil this facade of everything's gonna be fine, right? The sugar coating on the shit of the world. But this is the moment we get to compost that shit, and this is the moment that we get to say, hope is this granular living being. It's not this fact, this unassailable statute. It's this living, breathing being, like a seed that's constantly willing to grow beyond what it was to become what it may be without attachment. I mean, every time I look at these trees, all trees, I'm like, what? I mean, every tree is so unique because they are, below the ground, above the ground. They're responding to their environment in a very unique, extraordinarily individual, and incredibly tenacious way. And each of us are also learning how to adapt to the world around us and thrive. And I love especially those trees that get knocked down and then they still keep growing up. And those trees that you just know have been through it. And they still are living and loving. It's amazing. I look at the time, and here's our final question of our Q&A, friends. Martina says, how many hours should I use my grow lights for microgreens during the day or night? I live in 6B, Massachusetts. Sending love to Massachusetts and sending love to you and your microgreens. So microgreens, 24 hours. When you're growing seedlings, you want to have 18 hours of light. You want to have some dark, because interesting, kind of light and dark kind of function as inhales and exhales for plants. There's so much more to share about that. Plants are amazing. But with microgreens, because you're harvesting them generally 8-10 days after you sow them, it's kind of extractive to just be grow, 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 but they're not going to grow any really healthier or better if you have them on 18 hours versus 24. They'll grow a little bit faster. And so, with microgreens, we're literally 24 hours a day with them. With the seedlings, it's important for them to grow, but then also they need the darkness so that they can actually, as they're growing, kind of exhale and take in the gases differently, release their byproducts of respiration appropriately. So if you have more than a 2-week, 3-week transplant, having that light dark contrast is really important. But microgreens, don't bother. 24 hours. Grow, and we have beautiful grow lights on our website. If you didn't already know, we have 17-inch lights and 33-inch lights. They're all made by our friend Vic Wright in Illinois. He was one of the original innovators of LEDs. And in his retirement, he's always loved to garden. So in his retirement, he is just developing LED lights for growers, for gardeners, which is amazing because there are a lot of terrible grow lights out there. Every year I get emails and messages, hundreds of pictures of seedlings that are so sad and stressed for light, even with a light 4 inches above them. A very expensive grow light that someone paid lots of money for, and it breaks my heart every time. So yes, I'm so glad you're growing microgreens. If you want to, and if you didn't already know, a final shameless plug, we have a microgreens mini course. We have a huge seed starting academy. They're all free. Lots of other online courses and lots of great resources for you to learn and grow and be inspired by on our website. And we made all our courses free almost a year ago at the beginning of the pandemic, because we realized we were like, well, we're losing money. Everybody's losing money. Who's going to be able to pay for these classes? No, we have all needed this information now more than ever. And we've just learned this information from plants and our generous elders. So how about we just make them free? And how else can we show love for our community and for our world? And for ourselves. So that's why you'll find lots of awesome free online courses on our website for you, friends. So fruitionseeds.com, hop on in and don't be shy. Join the conversation. It's a really fun party, especially in virtual pandemic times. And Martina says, I'll be ordering today. I took the mini course yesterday. Yay, enjoy it. And don't be shy. So I love to end, as we begin all of our live Q&As, with a song, story, poem, with something to ground us in our time together. And today, in honor of Martin Luther King, some words from Dr. King. If you cannot fly, run. If you cannot run, walk. If you cannot walk, crawl. Whatever you do, just keep moving. One more time. If you cannot run, if you cannot fly, run. If you cannot run, walk. And if you cannot walk, crawl. Whatever you do, just keep moving. Thank you, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You are here with us in our hearts. Thank you. We celebrate you today and Monday. And may we celebrate you every day. Seth says, thanks for the morning seed happiness. My first time seeing you all. Brilliant. Can't wait for next time, Seth. We hang out here every Saturday morning. And can't wait for next time. Sending love from our gardens to yours. And where's the finish button? Aha.